Welcome to Canary Quilts. You can get our free patterns in our free resource library located at canaryquilts.com. You can access this from the library access page. Scroll down the page to sign up for a free password to enter our free resource library or click to enter the free resource library. Once in our free resource library, you will have access to all our free patterns and downloads. We put out a new free pattern every Friday. I hope you enjoy this video and please subscribe to our channel so you will be notified of all our new content. Thank you. This week we are doing a mom log cabin mini quilt. It is comprised of 4 paper-pieced log cabin blocks. So this is the fall mom log cabin quilt pattern that we're going to be making today. This is a mini quilt and each of these blocks is about 6 inches in size square. So it's going to be a small quilt. So I've got everything cut out already. I've got all the green pieces I need to have cut out and the orange pieces. Got those pre-cut. Over here you can see I've already got 3 of the blocks made. And today we're going to go through how to put these blocks together. And in my pattern I have either a color paper piece pattern or I have just the lines paper piece pattern. And today I think I'm going to use the color pattern, but if you don't use the color pattern, one thing I like to do is put a mark in here on what colors need to go where. So all the green colors go here, so I would put a G, so that when I'm working on this at the sewing machine, I don't get mixed up as to where these colors need to go. And all these are the orange pieces. So I'm going to get all my materials around and I'm going to go over to the machine and I'm going to show you how to put this paper piece log cabin block together. Okay, I'm over here at my machine and I've brought my colors here stacked in the order that I'm going to need them. So I'm going to set those aside. I've got my pattern here that I'm going to be sewing directly on. I've got a small rotary cutter, a small mat to cut my pieces on, and then I've got this ruler that's made for paper piecing. It's called an quarter ruler, and it's got this 1/4 inch ridge right here so that you can just put it up against the paper and the fabric and cut your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I am going to get started here. I've also got tape for the very first piece. So I'm going to sew on the back of this pattern. And the first thing I'm going to need are these 2 square pieces for A1 and A2, which are right here. So when you flip it over, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it here in the camera, but you can see the lines of the pattern here. So A2 is my green. So my A2 is right here. A2, A1. So there's where we're going to be placing this. And I'm going to be putting it 1/4 inch over this line right here. So A2 is going to lay here. We're going to put A1, which is the yellow, on top of A2 for now, so that when we sew it, it's going to turn over and go over top of A2. So put these together, lay them over top of A2, 1/4 inch overhang of all the lines, and I'm just going to tape the back of this piece in place so that it stays put right now while I flip it and sew it. So now when I flip it, I'm going to sew this line right here. You want to make sure that your stitch is very low, like 1.5, so that it perforates the paper and makes it easy to pull off in the end. So there you can see our seam. So I'm going to pull the tape off, and I'm going to go to my iron, and I'm going to iron it open just like that. So we have our first two pieces laid. Okay, so my first two pieces are ironed together. So I have now made these two squares right here. I also backstitch in the beginning and the end because I found with my paper piecing sometimes these threads, when you're working a lot, will get pulled out. So from here on out, we're going to be doing the same thing for every piece. And we've done A1 and we've done A2. Now we're going to do A3. So I'm going to flip it around so A3 is facing me, and I'm going to fold the paper on this line, the top of A3, which exposes the fabric so that now I can take my add a quarter ruler, bump it up against the paper, and as you can see, I did pretty good with the 1/4 inch, but it just depends on what materials and how you laid them. And we're just going to trim this at 1/4 inch. So that's how you will do every piece going from here on out. So now where we trimmed, it's going to be the next yellow or orange. I'm going to lay it there, line it up, and the seam lines for this, or the edge lines for this piece, are right here. So I'm going to make sure my material hangs over 1/4 inch on each side of this. So then I'm just going to carefully turn it over, and I'm going to sew right there on A3 where I folded. And there's that stitch right there. So now I will iron that up. So there's a start to our log cabin block. So we've done 1, 2, 3, now we're on to 4, which is right here. So I'm going to turn it so it's facing me, and I'm going to fold on this A4 line right there. Expose my fabrics. See how I'm doing at 1/4 inch? Doing good. Just trim it a little. And then the next piece we're putting on is a green piece. So I'll grab my green piece here. I'll mark the edges of the A4 so you can see them, and we're gonna just line this up with the edges together, and it lays more than 1/4 inch on each side, so we're doing good there because we'll trim these later. So I'm just going to take this, turn it over gently and carefully, make sure I don't lose my piece, and I'm going to sew on that A4 line. And right there is my stitch mark. So now I'm going to iron that back. And we're just going to keep going around in a circle basically. We're going to do 2 greens, 2 oranges. Okay, so we've done A4. So we've done these 4 pieces right here. So we're going to do A5 now, right here. Turn it towards me, fold on this line. This was our last stitch, so we're going to fold on this line. And now you can see we do have extra material. We're going to butt up our ruler to our paper, and we're going to cut our 1/4 inch seam allowance. And our A5 is a green. Grab that piece. I'll mark these edges so you can see them. Lay it up edge to edge. Make sure there's at least a 1/4 hanging over on each side. And now I'm going to sew right here on this A5 line. There's our seam right here. Now I'm going to iron that up. So you can see we started here and we're just working our way around here. So we'll go to A6, do the same thing, turn it, fold it on the A6 line, trim it, get our next orange piece, line it up, make sure it's a 1/4 inch past each of these lines, take it over, sew it on the A6 line. Take it to the iron it up. Turn it over. A7's facing me. Fold it on A7 and trim your seam allowance. Add your next orange piece. Show you these marks. Make sure your piece is over those. This piece is a little close, but it'll work. Take it to the machine, carefully put it under, and sew along A7. And then iron it up. I am now going to do this. I'm just going to keep continuing right around doing exactly the same thing. Okay, so we're to the last orange piece right now, and then we got 2 more green pieces. But when you lay your orange piece down on the other side, you want it to overlap this line, but you want it not to overlap, you want it to overlap this line, but also this line, because this is our 1/4 inch seam allowance for the outside of the block. So we'll turn it over, or we'll fold it on that one right there on A19. Let's trim it. And we want this line, which is right here, but we want this outside line over here. So that's where we want our fabric to overlap, just like that. So the green pieces are going to be the same because both of them come to the edge of the block. So you're going to want to turn, when you turn it over, you're going to want to make sure your piece comes out to there. And especially on this last block, which is the length, make sure your piece covers from seam allowance to seam allowance. So we'll do our next to last green piece. We'll fold it. We'll trim it. And I'm going to mark the outside of the block. So I'm marking these lines right here. Actually, on this one, it could be that line or that line. But our piece is big enough, so it's going to go the entire way. So we're going to sew right here on A20. The other thing is I'm only sewing to the end of the colors. I'm measuring my fabric to the end of the seam allowance, but sewing only on the line. Okay, here's our last piece, our last green piece. So we're gonna fold on 21. We're gonna trim. And then we're placing our piece from seam allowance outer edge to seam allowance outer edge. So just like the orange piece, from here to here. And then we're gonna sew along this A21 line. So my piece is big enough, definitely. So there's our block sewn onto the paper. So what we're gonna do now is take it over to the cutting table, and we're gonna cut right along these outer edges here. Okay, so I'm at my cutting table with my block, which I just finished sewing, and I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to trim on these outer lines here so we have a seam allowance. This is where we're going to sew, so you don't want to cut there, you want to cut out here. And there's our finished block. So now we'll take all 4 of our blocks. This is what they look like together. And from here, we're gonna sew, we'll sew these 2 together, and we'll sew these 2 together. I'm going to pin the side that I need to sew. And I'm going to sew right here along this outer A18. Is that correct? Yes. Make sure I'm correct. Same with these. Yes, A18 is the bottom, and then I'm going to sew along A19 on the top one. So I'm going to go over and get these sewn together. Okay, I sewed from edge to edge along this line here on both of these, and I'm going to pull the paper off. Oop. Yeah, it's already coming off. I'm going to pull the paper off before I iron the seam allowance. So there's the paper off, and then I'm going to iron my seam open here. So I'll have my 2 pieces. So I'm going to get those ironed open. And there's my seam allowance ironed open. I'm going to flip it, and now I'm going to put it together like this. So I'm going to put the seams I just did, I'm going to match those. My greens match up. Check that my greens match. Yep, my greens match up on this side. So now I'm going to sew from edge to edge here along this A19 and this A18. Okay, there's that seam that I sewed right there. And let's look at it. Yep, looks great. So at this point, I think we'll just pull all of our paper off, and then I'll sew that seam open, and then I'll be able to iron the entire thing. So I'm going to get all my paper pulled off at this time. So this is when it becomes important that you use that really short stitch so that you can perforate it, the paper, and it comes up nice and easy. It's still not the funnest part of, or the most fun part of paper piecing, but it certainly makes the job easier if you do that smaller stitch. Okay, I've got my pieces all my paper pulled. As you can see on this one, I did not use a smaller stitch, so it was a little harder to pull the paper, but it will be fine. So I've got to iron this seam open. There we go, there's my little fall mum log cabin paper pieced mini quilt. Now all I have to do is find a border to go on it. I'm going to do a 1-inch border and then bind it and quilt it. But that's what I was going for. And with scraps from another paper piece quilt I did, this is what I got. I think one thing I like about paper piecing is just the precise corners you get, the precise type of things you can draw with paper piecing, and the seams are so flat too. I mean, it seems like when I do just regular piecing, there's a little bit of puffiness to it, and this is just a flat piece of material. So, and it's a lot of fun. It's kind of like, I don't know, coloring or something, because I used that colored piece of paper and I just followed the colors and sewed them on. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial. This is the free pattern I'm giving out for Friday, October 8th. And if you click in the link below, you can sign up to get this free pattern on our website and other free patterns that we've done. So thank you very much for watching this video.